So if you've ever watched that sci-fi movie, Lucy, you know the ending. This wild, completely over-the-top scene that perfectly captures how we love to fantasize about our own origins. Scarlett Johansson, right? She unlocks 100% of her brain, becomes this hyper-advanced human, and literally time travels millions of years into the past just to reach out and touch fingers with a prehistoric ape. It's gorgeous, honestly. Great piece of imagery. But it paints a picture that's basically the opposite of how human evolution actually worked. That prehistoric ape in the movie, by the way, that's a reference to Australopithecus afarensis, universally known as Lucy. And the real Lucy was not a sci-fi hero unlocking the secrets of the universe. She's, for all intents and purposes, a forensic cold case. A stack of broken fossils and decades of researchers trying to answer some pretty practical questions about how she actually lived. So today, we're stripping away the sci-fi mythology and looking strictly at the evidence. Because the real story isn't about some magical brain upgrade. It's a much slower, deeply physical, honestly way more impressive tale of anatomical survival. Let's start with the moment she was actually pulled out of the ground. November 24th, 1974. The Afar Desert in Ethiopia, which is about as harsh and dry as environments get. Anthropologist Donald Johanson is surveying a dry gully with his assistant, Tom Gray, and they spot a piece of arm bone just sticking out of the dirt. Further digging turns up a bit of skull, then a thigh bone. By the end of the day, his team has pulled dozens of fragments out of the ground, all from a single skeleton. They end up with roughly 40% of her body, which is almost unheard of for a fossil this old. And the way she got her name is honestly a perfect little snapshot of field research. No grand Latin ceremony. Just a team sitting around camp that night, completely euphoric, playing a cassette of the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on repeat. The name just stuck. But here's the obvious question. If this is our most famous ancestor, the supposed spark of humanity, you'd assume her brain must have been pretty impressive, right? Because intelligence has to be the engine driving all this, doesn't it? Well, that assumption actually drove anthropological theory for decades. The idea was that intelligence came first, that a jump in brain size gave our ancestors the cognitive leap to invent tools, stand up, and take over the landscape. Lucy's bones shattered that completely. Her skull held somewhere between 400 and 500 cubic centimeters of brain matter. That puts her squarely in chimpanzee territory, a fraction of what's running in your head right now. So the shockwave this skeleton sent through science had nothing to do with her head. It was her hips and her knees. Think about a chimpanzee trying to walk on two legs. Its thigh bone runs almost perfectly straight up and down from hip to knee, so its center of gravity never sits over its feet. Every step, it has to heave its whole upper body side to side just to keep from tipping over. That's the waddle. Massive energy burned for barely any forward progress. Lucy's thigh bone solved that exact problem. Her femur angled inward from hip to knee, something called a valgus knee, one of the clearest signs of habitual upright walking in the entire fossil record. It brings your feet directly under your center of mass, letting you place one foot cleanly in front of the other instead of throwing your torso side to side with every step. You're using that same angle right now, in your own legs, every time you walk down the street. Her pelvis backs it up, too. Short, broad, bowl-shaped, built to hold your organs up against gravity instead of hanging flat off a climbing frame like an ape's does. Put the two together and there's only one conclusion. Lucy walked upright, regularly, millions of years before her brain was doing anything close to complex human thought. Walking came first. But bones only tell you what the anatomy was capable of. They don't prove how she actually moved through the world. For that, you need something else entirely, and it comes from a genuinely bizarre geological accident in Tanzania. In 1976, a team led by anthropologist Mary Leakey found something at a site called Laetoli that turns abstract anatomy into an actual frozen moment in time. A nearby volcano had erupted, coating the whole landscape in fine ash. A light rain came right after, turning that ash into something close to wet cement. And while it was still soft, a small group of early hominins just walked straight across it. The sun baked the ash rock solid, and the prints survived, sealed, for 3.6 million years. Now, apes have feet that are basically hands, a divergent big toe sticking out sideways to grip branches. If Lucy's kind were true groundwalkers, these prints shouldn't look anything like a chimp's footprint. And they don't. You get a deep, pronounced heel strike, exactly the way you walk. And that big toe? Completely gone. Aligned straight forward in a row, acting like a lever to push off the ground. Here's the detail that gets me every time, though. The trail runs about 75 feet and shows at least 2 individuals walking together, one bigger, one smaller. And the smaller one is stretching their stride to step directly inside the bigger one's footprints, the whole way across. Think about walking behind someone taller than you on a snowy sidewalk. You naturally stretch your legs to land in their tracks because the snow's already packed down. That exact behavior, frozen in volcanic ash, millions of years before anyone invented the wheel or fire on purpose. So clearly, walking on open ground was working great for them. Which raises kind of a glaring contradiction. If the ground worked that well, why keep any connection to the trees at all? Being caught halfway between forest and savanna sounds like a massive vulnerability. The answer to that came from a child. In the year 2000, Ethiopian anthropologist Zeresene Alamseeged uncovered the remarkably intact skeleton of a 3-year-old Australopithecus girl, now known as Selim, who lived slightly earlier than Lucy. Because she died so young, her skeleton was essentially caught mid-construction, bones not fully fused yet, which preserved delicate features that usually wear down in adults. When Alamseeged finally exposed her shoulder blades, the anatomy was a stark contrast to her walking legs. Her shoulder sockets faced upward, toward the sky, exactly the architecture you'd find in a gorilla or a chimpanzee, optimized for reaching overhead and hauling your whole body weight up into a tree. Your shoulder sockets face outward to the side instead, built for the free-swinging arm motion you need to run or throw something. And CT scans of Selim's inner ear told the same story. Her balance system was built for the complex, 3-dimensional acrobatics of navigating tree branches, not the flat, steady rhythm of walking on open ground. So the anatomy reveals a genuinely divided existence. By day, they capitalized on everything bipedalism gave them, seeing over tall grass, foraging efficiently, spotting predators from a height no 4-legged animal could match. But the moment the sun went down, that open savanna turned into a death trap. No claws, no sharp teeth, no fire. Their only real defense was elevation. Every single night, they had to scale a tree and sleep out of reach of whatever was hunting in the dark. One of the researchers compared it to locking your front door before bed. It wasn't optional. It was a non-negotiable security protocol. And that exact tension, thriving on the ground by day but depending on real height at night, sets up the strangest, most quietly devastating part of this whole story. For roughly 40 years, Lucy's fragmented skeleton basically sat in a museum drawer as a 3-million-year-old cold case. Then in 2016, anthropologist John Kappelman at the University of Texas at Austin ran her fragile fossils through a high-resolution CT scanner. And the scans lit up damage that had been completely invisible for 4 decades. Sharp, clean fractures across her right shoulder, her ribs, her pelvis. Here's the critical clue, though. It's not just that the fractures are there. It's what's missing. No callus. When a living animal breaks a bone and survives even a few weeks, the body starts healing immediately, building a rough patch of new bone right over the break. Kappelman's scans show 0 of that. The fractured edges are sharp and clean, meaning these injuries happened right around, or exactly at, the moment of her death. And the shoulder fracture specifically is a compression fracture. Not a clean snap, but bone crushed downward under a massive load. That's the exact injury emergency room doctors see today when someone falls from a real height and instinctively throws their arms out to brace for impact. Totally involuntary. Your brain doesn't decide to do it. Your nervous system just takes over. So based on the physics, Kappelman's team worked out a pretty specific scenario. She likely dropped from a branch over 40 feet up, hit close to 30 miles an hour by the time she landed, and in that final fraction of a second, her body did exactly what yours would do. Arms out, instinct beating thought to the punch. The impact shattered her shoulder, her ribs, her pelvis, all at once. Now, not everyone in the field agrees with this version, and that's worth being upfront about. Some researchers look at those exact same fractures and argue the damage happened after burial, from millions of years of sediment slowly crushing down on top of her, not from a fall at all. It's a fair counter-argument. Geological pressure really can produce clean breaks in old bone. And honestly, that disagreement is the important part here. It shows what real science looks like. A heavily studied skeleton, a state-of-the-art scanner, serious experts, and still genuine, unresolved debate. Good science lands on the most probable explanation and holds it loosely, ready to update. That's not a weakness. That's the opposite of the tidy certainty you get in a movie. Either way, whether it was a fall or geological crushing, the core of it doesn't change. Lucy's entire existence played out in that gap between the ground and the canopy. So pulling all this together, we started by tearing down the Hollywood fantasy, the idea that we're here because of some sudden, magical neurological awakening. And the forensic evidence tells a much grittier story. You are not here because one ancestor got remarkably smart overnight. You're here because a vulnerable, 3-foot-tall creature with a chimpanzee-sized brain made millions of unglamorous, high-stakes choices correctly over countless generations, day after day, adapting just enough to survive the ground and just enough to survive the trees. That legacy is hardwired into you right now. Every time you go for a walk and place one foot in front of the other without swaying side to side, that's a valgus knee engineered and stress-tested in the African desert millions of years ago, still operating exactly as designed. Every time you slip on ice and your arms shoot out on instinct, that's a prehistoric reflex baked into your nervous system long before your brain evolved into whatever it is now. You might be executing the exact same involuntary movement that was Lucy's final act, which leaves one thought worth sitting with. When we look at Lucy's skeleton, we spot the contradictions easily. Shoulder sockets built for climbing paired clumsily with a pelvis built for walking, a species caught right in the middle of a massive transition. So millions of years from now, when whoever's next is brushing the dirt off our fossilized bones, what parts of us will they look at and think, that's such a bizarre, half-finished compromise, and have absolutely no idea we never once noticed it ourselves? Because here's the thing Hollywood got backwards. In that movie, the fantasy is Lucy touching a finger to some primitive creature and instantly becoming something more than human. But the real Lucy never needed a finger touch to change everything. She already had. Every step you've taken today, every time you've caught yourself before a fall, that's her signature, still running in you, 3 million years later. No time machine required. She never left.